The stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of the general store, and Beatrice Everly stepped down into the dusty street of Alamosa, Colorado, her heart hammering against her ribs as she clutched the worn carpet bag that contained everything she owned in this world. It was August of 1883, and the late afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the small mountain town nestled in the San Luis Valley, surrounded by the towering Sangre de Cristo Mountains to the east and the San Juan Range to the west. She smoothed her best dress, a faded blue calico that had seen better days, and searched the faces of the men gathered outside the mercantile for the one who had answered her advertisement, seeking a position as a mail-order bride. Her previous husband, Herbert Thornton, had sent her away 6 months after their wedding when it became clear she could not give him children. The shame of it still burned through her chest like hot coals, the memory of his cold eyes and colder words as he informed her that a barren woman was of no use to a man who needed sons to work his land in Kansas. He had put her on the morning train with nothing but her belongings and $20, declaring their marriage annulled through connections he had in the courthouse. Beatrice had been 23 years old then, and now at 24, she had spent months scraping together survival in Denver, taking in washing and mending until her fingers bled, until she could no longer afford even the tiny room above the laundry. Desperation had driven her to place an advertisement, though she had been honest in her letter to the man who responded, telling him plainly about her condition, expecting nothing but silence in return. Instead, Isaac Sutherland had written back with words that seemed too good to be true, saying he needed a wife to help run his ranch and that he had no particular need for children. His letter had been direct and practical, outlining what he could offer and what he expected, and Beatrice had read it so many times the paper had grown soft as fabric. Now she stood in this unfamiliar town, wondering if the man would take one look at her thin frame and tired face and change his mind entirely. "Miss Everly?" A deep voice pulled her from her thoughts, and she turned to see a tall man approaching from across the street. He was probably close to 30, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar beneath a dusty brown hat. His eyes were a striking gray blue, like storm clouds over the mountains, and his face was angular and weathered from years of outdoor work. He wore worn denims and a faded shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms, and there was a gentleness in his expression that immediately eased some of the tension in her shoulders. "Mr. Sutherland?" She managed to keep her voice steady despite the nervousness fluttering in her stomach. "Isaac, please." He removed his hat, revealing more of his face, and offered her a slight smile. "I hope the journey was not too difficult. It is a long way from Denver." "It was fine, thank you." Beatrice clutched her bag tighter, aware of the curious stares from passers-by. "I appreciate you meeting me." Isaac glanced around at the gathering spectators and gestured toward a buckboard wagon tied up near the hardware store. "Perhaps we should speak somewhere more private. My ranch is about 5 miles outside of town. We can talk on the way, and you can decide if this arrangement suits you. If not, I will pay for a room at the boarding house and your ticket back to wherever you wish to go." The offer surprised her, the decency in it, and Beatrice felt something loosen in her chest. "That is very kind of you." He took her bag without asking and carried it to the wagon, then helped her up onto the seat with a hand that was work-roughened but careful. Once he had settled beside her and taken up the reins, guiding the 2 horses out of town and onto the dusty road that led south through the valley, the tension seemed to ease between them. The landscape spread out in all directions, vast and golden with late summer grasses, the mountains standing like sentinels in the distance. "I want to be honest with you from the start," Isaac said after they had traveled in silence for several minutes. "I read your letter, all of it, including the part about your first marriage. I want you to know that it makes no difference to me." Beatrice stared at him, searching his profile for signs of deception or hidden cruelty, but found none. "You said in your letter that you did not need children, but I assumed you meant you already had some, or that you were older and past the age of wanting them." "No, I have no children." He kept his eyes on the road ahead, his hands steady on the reins. "The truth is, I was married before, 5 years ago. My wife died in childbirth, along with our baby. It was a difficult birth, and there was nothing the doctor could do. After that, I decided I did not want to go through such a thing again. I will not risk another woman's life for the sake of having sons." The raw pain in his voice was unmistakable, and Beatrice felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." He glanced at her briefly, then back at the road. "I have a good spread, 160 acres with water rights to the creek that runs through the property. I raise cattle and horses, and I do well enough to live comfortably. What I need is someone to share the work in the home, someone I can talk to at the end of the day. I'm not looking for romance or grand passion, just partnership and companionship. If you can accept that, then I think we might suit each other well." Beatrice considered his words carefully, watching the way the sunlight played across the golden grasses and the way the mountains seemed to cradle the valley. "I can accept that. I've learned not to expect much from life, Mr. Sutherland. A safe home and honest work sound like more than I dared hope for." "Isaac," he corrected gently, "and I think you should expect more from life than that. Miss Everly, everyone deserves some measure of happiness." "Beatrice," she replied, surprised by the kindness in his words, "and I suppose I will settle for contentment. Happiness seems like a luxury I cannot afford." They rode in silence for a while longer, and Beatrice found herself stealing glances at the man beside her. He had a strong profile, a straight nose, and a firm jaw, and there was something solid and dependable about him that eased the constant anxiety she had carried since Herbert had cast her out. When they finally turned off the main road onto a smaller track that wound through a stand of cottonwoods, she caught her first glimpse of his ranch. The house was modest but well built, a sturdy log structure with a covered porch and real glass windows that glinted in the afternoon sun. There was a barn and several outbuildings, all in good repair, and she could see cattle grazing in the distance beyond a split-rail fence. It was more than she had expected, more than she felt she deserved, and tears pricked at her eyes despite her best efforts to contain them. Isaac drew the wagon to a stop in front of the house and set the brake before turning to look at her. "What do you think?" "It is beautiful," Beatrice whispered, not trusting herself to say more. He helped her down from the wagon and carried her bag up onto the porch. "There are 2 bedrooms. You can have the larger one, the one that faces east and gets the morning sun. I will take the smaller room. I want you to feel comfortable here, Beatrice. This will be your home as much as mine." She followed him inside, and her breath caught at the sight of the interior. It was clean and orderly, with simple furniture that was well made and functional. There was a stone fireplace dominating one wall of the main room, a kitchen area with a cast-iron stove, and windows that let in plenty of light. Isaac showed her to the bedroom he had mentioned, and she found it furnished with a large bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a dresser, and a wardrobe. "I know it is not fancy," Isaac said, standing in the doorway with his hat in his hands, "but it is solid and warm in winter." "It is more than I expected," Beatrice said honestly, setting her bag down on the bed. "Thank you. The preacher can come out tomorrow if you are willing," Isaac continued, his voice careful and respectful. "But if you need more time to decide, I understand. You can stay here as long as you need to make up your mind, and I will not pressure you either way." Beatrice turned to face him fully, studying his open, honest face. "I have already decided. I will marry you tomorrow, Isaac. I have nothing to go back to and no reason to wait." Something shifted in his expression, a relief that was quickly masked but unmistakable. "Then I will ride into town first thing in the morning and bring the preacher back with me. We will make it official." That evening, they sat together at the simple wooden table while Beatrice prepared a meal from the supplies she found in the kitchen. Isaac had fresh vegetables from a small garden behind the house, and there was salt pork and beans, and she made biscuits that were not as light as she would have liked but were edible. They ate in companionable silence, and afterward, Isaac showed her around the property in the fading light, explaining his routines and what would be expected of her. "I do not expect you to work yourself to death," he said as they walked back toward the house, the first stars beginning to appear overhead. "But if you could handle the kitchen garden, the chickens, and the cooking and cleaning, that would be a great help. I can manage the livestock and the heavy work. On Saturdays, I usually go into town for supplies, and you are welcome to come along whenever you wish." "That sounds reasonable," Beatrice agreed, surprised again by how fair he was being. "I can also do mending and laundry, and I am good with accounts if you need help with record-keeping." "I would appreciate that," Isaac admitted. "Numbers are not my strong suit." They stood on the porch together as full darkness fell, and the sounds of the night surrounded them, crickets and the distant call of an owl. Beatrice wrapped her arms around herself against the cooling air, and Isaac noticed immediately. "You should go inside and rest," he said quietly. "Tomorrow will be a long day." She nodded and turned toward the door, then paused. "Isaac, thank you for giving me this chance. I will not disappoint you." "I do not think you could," he replied, and there was something in his voice that made her heart skip strangely in her chest. That night, Beatrice lay in the comfortable bed in her new room and stared up at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the house settling around her. For the first time in months, she felt something that might have been hope stirring in her chest, fragile as a bird's wing, but undeniably present. Isaac Sutherland was not what she had expected, and this rough but beautiful place was nothing like the harsh existence she had endured with Herbert. Tomorrow she would become a wife again, and this time, perhaps things would be different. Morning came with golden light streaming through the window, and Beatrice rose and dressed carefully in her best dress, which was still the faded blue calico but freshly brushed and as presentable as she could make it. She found Isaac already up and dressed in clean clothes, his hair dampened and combed back, and he nodded approvingly when he saw her. "You look very nice," he said simply, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush. "Thank you. So do you." He saddled a horse and rode into town while Beatrice made breakfast and tidied the already clean house, too nervous to sit still. He returned 2 hours later with Reverend Thomas, a kindly older man with white hair and gentle eyes, who greeted Beatrice warmly and asked her several times if she was certain about this decision. When she assured him that she was, he opened his worn Bible and conducted a simple ceremony in the main room of the house, with the morning sunlight streaming through the windows like a benediction. Isaac spoke his vows in a steady voice, promising to honor and cherish her, to provide for her and protect her, and when it was Beatrice's turn, she found her own voice surprisingly strong as she pledged the same. Isaac slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as though it had been made for her. The Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, and Isaac leaned down and pressed a chaste kiss to her lips, brief and gentle, and Beatrice felt tears sting her eyes at the sweetness of it. After the Reverend left, declining Isaac's invitation to stay for lunch, the newlyweds stood together in the quiet house, suddenly uncertain. Isaac cleared his throat and reached into his pocket, pulling out a folded piece of paper. "I wanted to give you this," he said, handing it to her. "It is a document stating that you have equal rights to this property and everything on it. If anything happens to me, it all goes to you automatically. I had it drawn up by the lawyer in town last week." Beatrice unfolded the paper with shaking hands and read the legal language that confirmed his words. "Isaac, you barely know me. Why would you do this?" "Because you are my wife," he said simply, as though it were the most obvious thing in the world. "And because I believe in treating people fairly. You are taking a risk by marrying me, trusting that I will be good to you. This is my way of showing that I take that trust seriously." She looked up at him, this man who kept surprising her with his decency, and felt something warm unfurl in her chest. "I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything," he smiled, a real smile that transformed his serious face and made him look younger. "Now, I should get back to work. The horses need tending, and I have been neglecting some repairs on the barn. Will you be all right here on your own?" "Of course," Beatrice assured him, though part of her wanted to ask him to stay, to talk more, to help her understand this strange and unexpected kindness. The days that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm that surprised them both. Beatrice woke early each morning and prepared breakfast, while Isaac tended to the animals. They ate together, talking about the work that needed doing and the small details of running the ranch. Isaac was patient in teaching her about the property and the routines, never condescending or impatient when she made mistakes or had to ask questions. In turn, Beatrice threw herself into making the house a true home, cleaning and organizing, tending the garden with care, and preparing meals that grew more elaborate as she became familiar with the kitchen and the supplies available. In the evenings, they sat together by the fireplace, even though it was still too warm to light it, and talked about their lives before. Isaac spoke about growing up in Missouri, about coming west with dreams of building something of his own, about meeting his first wife, Catherine, at a church social and falling in love with her gentle nature. His voice grew heavy when he described losing her, the way he had felt powerless watching her suffer, the terrible silence that had filled the house afterward. "I buried them on the hill behind the house," he said one night, staring into the empty fireplace. "There are 2 crosses there, if you want to see them. I go up there sometimes, just to talk to her, to let her know I am managing all right." "I would like to see it," Beatrice said softly, "if you would not mind taking me." He took her the next evening, and they climbed the gentle slope behind the house to where 2 simple wooden crosses stood beneath a large cottonwood tree. The view from there was breathtaking, the entire valley spread out below them with the mountains rising on all sides. Beatrice stood quietly while Isaac knelt and pulled some weeds that had grown up around the graves, speaking softly to Catherine, as though she could hear him. "I brought my new wife to meet you," he said, his voice carrying on the evening breeze. "Her name is Beatrice, and I think you would like her. She is strong and kind, and she makes the house feel like a home again. I hope you do not mind that I married again. I was lonely, Catherine. I know you would understand." Beatrice felt tears streaming down her face, moved by his devotion to his lost wife, and by the gentle way he included her in this private moment. When Isaac stood and turned to her, he saw her tears and reached out instinctively, pulling her into an embrace that was warm and solid and comforting. "I am sorry," she whispered against his chest. "I do not mean to cry." "You have nothing to apologize for," he murmured, his hand smoothing over her hair. "Catherine was a part of my life, and I will always love her memory. But that does not mean there is no room in my heart for you, Beatrice. You are my wife now, and I want you to be happy here." She pulled back enough to look up at him, and in that moment, something changed between them. His eyes searched her face, and then slowly, carefully, he lowered his head and kissed her. Really kissed her. Not the brief press of lips from their wedding, but a real kiss that spoke of longing and loneliness and the beginning of something deeper. Beatrice responded without thinking, her arms going around his neck, and for several long moments they stood there on the hillside, holding each other as the sun set behind the mountains and painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. When they finally drew apart, both breathing hard, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I did not plan for this," he admitted. "I thought we would just be partners, helping each other get by. But Beatrice, I find myself caring for you more each day, and I want you to know that if you feel the same, I would welcome it. And if you do not, I will respect that and continue as we agreed." "I feel the same," Beatrice confessed, her heart racing. "I did not expect it either. But Isaac, you have shown me more kindness in these few weeks than anyone has in years. How could I not care for you?" They walked back to the house hand in hand, and that night, for the first time since their marriage, Isaac came to her room and knocked softly on the door. Beatrice opened it, her heart pounding, and he stood there in the lamplight looking uncertain and hopeful all at once. "May I stay with you tonight?" he asked quietly. "Not out of obligation or duty, but because I want to be close to you." "Yes," she whispered, stepping back to let him enter, and when he closed the door behind him and took her in his arms again, Beatrice felt as though she were finally home. The weeks turned into months, and the first chill of autumn began to creep into the mountain air. Beatrice and Isaac grew closer with each passing day, their partnership deepening into genuine love. They laughed together over meals, worked side by side in the garden, and spent long evenings talking about everything and nothing. Isaac taught her to ride, patient with her fear at first, celebrating when she finally cantered across the pasture on her own. Beatrice introduced order to his accounts, discovering that the ranch was doing even better financially than Isaac had realized, and together they made plans for the future. But shadows from the past still lingered. One Saturday in late October, they went into town for supplies, and as they walked along the wooden sidewalk, Beatrice heard a familiar voice that made her blood run cold. Well, if it is not the Barren bride herself. She turned slowly to see Herbert Thornton standing outside the saloon, looking older and meaner than she remembered. His clothes were dusty from travel, and there was a hardness in his eyes that sent fear shooting through her. Isaac stepped forward immediately, placing himself between Beatrice and her former husband. "I suggest you move along, friend." Herbert's eyes narrowed as he took in Isaac's protective stance. "Friend? This woman is a liar and a cheat. She took my money and my name and could not even give me the one thing a wife is supposed to provide. I heard she had wormed her way into another man's life, and I came to warn you before you waste any more time on damaged goods." "You will watch your tongue," Isaac said, his voice low and dangerous in a way Beatrice had never heard before. "Beatrice is my wife, legally and properly, and I will not have you speaking about her that way." "Your wife?" Herbert laughed, a harsh sound. "Did she tell you she cannot give you children? Did she mention that our marriage was annulled because she is useless as a woman?" "She told me everything," Isaac replied steadily. "And I married her anyway because I wanted a wife, not a broodmare. Now I will tell you one more time to move along before this gets unpleasant." Herbert's face twisted with anger. "You are a fool if you think she is worth anything. I should have left her in the street where she belonged." Isaac's fist connected with Herbert's jaw so fast that Beatrice barely saw the movement. Herbert staggered back and fell into the dusty street, and Isaac stood over him with his hands clenched at his sides. "If I ever hear that you have come near my wife again, or spoken her name, or even thought about her, I will do worse than knock you down," Isaac said, his voice shaking with controlled fury. "She is worth 10 of you, and I thank God every day that you were stupid enough to let her go. Now get out of this town and do not come back." Herbert scrambled to his feet, holding his bleeding mouth, and after a moment of glaring at them both, he turned and hurried away down the street. Isaac turned immediately to Beatrice, his expression softening as he took in her pale face and trembling hands. "Are you all right?" he asked, taking her hands in his. "You defended me," she whispered, still trying to process what had just happened. "You hid him for me." "Of course I did." Isaac pulled her into his arms, right there on the street with half the town watching. "You are my wife, Beatrice. I meant every word of my vows. No one gets to treat you that way, especially not some fool who was too blind to see what he had." Beatrice buried her face against his chest and let the tears come, tears of relief and gratitude and love for this man who had given her back her dignity. The townspeople who had witnessed the confrontation began to disperse, several of them nodding approvingly at Isaac or offering Beatrice sympathetic looks, and she realized that in this place she had found not just a home but a community that would stand by her. They finished their shopping in silence, Isaac's arm protectively around her waist, and on the ride home, Beatrice finally found her voice. "I was so afraid," she admitted. "When I heard his voice, all I could think about was how powerless I felt when he sent me away. How ashamed I was." "You have nothing to be ashamed of," Isaac said firmly, guiding the horses along the familiar road. "Nothing, do you hear me? What happened between you and him was not your fault. Some women cannot have children, just as some men cannot, and it does not make them any less valuable or worthy of love and respect. But you lost your chance at having a family because of me," Beatrice said, the old guilt rising up. "You are a good man, Isaac. You deserve to have children, to have sons, to carry on your name and work your land." Isaac pulled the wagon to a stop right there in the middle of the road and turned to face her fully. "Listen to me carefully, Beatrice. I married you, not the possibility of children. You are the family I chose, the family I want. If God sees fit to bless us with children someday, then I will be grateful. But if he does not, then I will still count myself the luckiest man alive because I have you. Do you understand?" "Isaac," she breathed, tears streaming down her face again, but these were different tears, warm and healing. "I love you," he said. And it was the first time he had spoken those words aloud, though they had both felt them growing between them for weeks. "I love you for your strength and your kindness and the way you make me laugh. I love the way you hum while you work in the garden and the way you scrunch up your nose when you are concentrating on the account books. I love waking up next to you and falling asleep with you in my arms. You are everything I need, Beatrice. Please believe that." "I do believe it," she whispered, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. "And I love you too, Isaac, more than I ever thought possible." They kissed there in the middle of the empty road, with the mountains watching and the autumn wind stirring the grasses around them, and Beatrice felt the last of her shame and fear crumble away, replaced by a certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Winter came to the valley with a fury that first year, blanketing the ranch in heavy snow and trapping them inside for days at a time. But Beatrice found that she did not mind, curled up next to Isaac by the roaring fire, reading aloud from books they had bought in town or simply talking about their dreams for the future. Isaac spoke of expanding the herd, of maybe building a bigger barn and acquiring more horses to sell. Beatrice mentioned wanting to plant fruit trees in the spring to start preserving more food so they would be even more self-sufficient. "We could build a bigger house too," Isaac suggested one night, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the snow fall outside the window. "Add on a couple more rooms, make it more comfortable for when we are old and gray." "I like the house the way it is," Beatrice said contentedly. "It feels cozy, just the right size for the two of us." "Well, maybe we will need those extra rooms someday," Isaac said carefully, and something in his tone made Beatrice pull back to look at him. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then reached up to brush a strand of hair from her face. "I know what the doctor told you after your first marriage, about how unlikely it was that you would conceive. But Beatrice, doctors have been wrong before. And even if they are not wrong, even if children never come, it does not change anything between us. I just want you to know that I see our future together, however it unfolds, and I am happy with it." Beatrice felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words, at the way he always seemed to know exactly what she needed to hear. "I gave up hoping for children a long time ago," she admitted. "It hurt too much to keep wishing for something that seemed impossible. But with you, Isaac, I find myself hoping again, just a little. And you are right. It does not change anything between us. We have each other, and that is more than enough." As winter gave way to spring, they worked together to repair fences damaged by the heavy snows and to prepare the fields for planting. Beatrice spent hours in the garden, coaxing new life from the thawing earth, and Isaac brought home 6 young fruit trees from town, apple and cherry, and they planted them together in a sheltered spot near the house. Life took on a peaceful rhythm, and Beatrice felt happier than she had ever imagined possible. It was in late April, when the valley was bursting with new growth and the mountains were still capped with snow, that Beatrice first noticed the changes in her body. She had always been irregular, a fact that had contributed to the doctor's dire predictions about her fertility, so at first, she dismissed the absence of her monthly courses as nothing unusual. But when her breasts grew tender and she found herself feeling queasy in the mornings, she began to wonder. She said nothing to Isaac at first, afraid to hope, afraid to disappoint him if she was wrong. But as the weeks passed and the symptoms persisted, she finally rode into town on one of her Saturday trips with Isaac and spoke quietly with Dr. Harrison, the elderly physician who had delivered half the babies in the valley. He examined her carefully and then smiled, his eyes twinkling. "Mrs. Sutherland, unless I am very much mistaken, you are going to have a baby. I would say you are about 3 months along, which means you can expect a little one around November." Beatrice stared at him in shock, unable to process his words. "But the doctors in Kansas said it was impossible. They said I was barren, that I would never conceive." "Well, those doctors were wrong," Dr. Harrison said kindly. "It happens more often than you might think. Sometimes the body just needs time, or the right circumstances, or perhaps you were under too much stress before. Whatever the reason, there is no doubt in my mind. You are definitely expecting." Beatrice walked out of the doctor's office in a daze, her hand pressed to her still flat stomach, trying to comprehend this miracle that had somehow occurred. She found Isaac waiting for her by the wagon, and the moment he saw her face, his expression shifted to concern. "What is wrong? Are you ill?" "No," she managed, then laughed, a sound that was half sob. "Isaac, I'm pregnant. The doctor says I'm 3 months along. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Isaac just stared at her, his face blank with shock. Then slowly, a smile spread across his features, transforming him, and he let out a whoop of joy that made several passers-by turn and stare. He swept Beatrice up in his arms and spun her around right there on the street, laughing and crying at the same time. "A baby," he kept saying, setting her down carefully as though she were made of glass. "Beatrice, we are going to have a baby. I cannot believe it. This is wonderful. This is the best news I have ever heard." "I thought you did not want children," she said, searching his face. "I thought you said you married me, not the possibility of children." "And I meant every word of that," Isaac said, taking her face in his hands. "I married you because I love you, and I would have been content with just the two of us for the rest of our lives. But Beatrice, this is a gift, a blessing I never dared to hope for. Of course I am happy. I am thrilled. I am terrified and excited, and so in love with you I can barely breathe." They held each other there on the street, oblivious to the curious stares and the whispers of the townspeople around them, and Beatrice felt as though her heart might burst from the sheer overwhelming joy of it all. After so many years of shame and disappointment, after being told she was worthless and broken, she was going to be a mother. And more than that, she was married to a man who had loved her even when he thought children were impossible, who had valued her for herself and not for what she could provide. The months that followed were filled with preparations and anticipation. Isaac built a cradle from smooth pine wood, sanding it until it was silky beneath their fingers, and Beatrice sewed tiny clothes and soft blankets, marveling at how small they were. They turned the smaller bedroom into a nursery, painting the walls a cheerful yellow and filling it with everything a baby might need. Isaac became almost comically protective, insisting that Beatrice rest frequently, refusing to let her lift anything heavier than a plate, and fussing over her until she had to laugh and shoo him away. "I am pregnant, not dying," she reminded him when he tried to carry her up the porch steps one evening. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, Isaac. I will be fine." "I know," he said, but his eyes were shadowed with old memories, old fears that he could not quite shake. "I just keep thinking about Catherine, about how quickly things went wrong. I could not bear it if I lost you, Beatrice. You are everything to me." She took his face in her hands and made him look at her. "I'm not, Catherine. This is not the same situation. Dr. Harrison says I'm healthy and strong, and the baby is growing well. You have to trust that everything will be all right." "I'm trying," he admitted, "but I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "I love you too," she whispered, kissing him softly. "And we are going to get through this together, just like we get through everything else." As summer turned to autumn and Beatrice's belly grew round and prominent, they spent long evenings sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. Isaac would rest his hand on her stomach, marveling at the movements of the baby within, and Beatrice would lean against him, content in a way she had never imagined possible. "What should we name the baby?" Isaac asked one evening in late October, when the air had turned crisp and the aspens on the mountainsides had turned brilliant gold. "I've been thinking about that," Beatrice admitted. "If it is a girl, I would like to name her Catherine, after your first wife. She gave you so much, Isaac, and I think she deserves to be remembered that way." Isaac's eyes filled with tears, and he pulled Beatrice close, kissing her forehead. "That is incredibly generous of you. Catherine would have liked you very much, I think. What about if it is a boy?" "I was thinking William, if that suits you. It was my father's name, and he was a good man, even if he died when I was young." "William Sutherland." Isaac tested the name, then nodded. "I like it. William or Catherine. Either way, this child is going to be so loved." The labor began on a cold November night, 3 weeks earlier than Dr. Harrison had predicted. Beatrice woke to sharp pains in her back and knew immediately what was happening. Isaac, sleeping beside her, woke when she gasped and was on his feet in an instant. "Is it time?" he asked, his face pale in the moonlight streaming through the window. "I think so," Beatrice managed, breathing through another contraction. "You need to go get Dr. Harrison." Isaac threw on his clothes and was out the door within minutes, riding hard for town in the darkness. Beatrice tried to stay calm, walking around the bedroom and breathing slowly, but as the contractions grew stronger and closer together, fear began to creep in. She thought about Catherine, about how she had died doing this very thing, and for the first time, she allowed herself to be truly afraid. But then Isaac was back, bursting through the door with Dr. Harrison right behind him, and the older man took charge immediately, his calm presence steadying them both. He examined Beatrice and nodded approvingly. "Everything looks good, Mrs. Sutherland. The baby is in the right position, and you are progressing well. This should be straightforward, but it will take time. First babies usually do." The hours that followed were a blur of pain and effort. Isaac stayed by Beatrice's side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her face with a cool cloth, whispering encouragement even though she could see the terror in his eyes every time she cried out. Dr. Harrison remained calm and competent, checking on her progress regularly and assuring them both that everything was proceeding normally. As dawn broke over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, the baby finally came, sliding into Dr. Harrison's waiting hands with a lusty cry that filled the room. Beatrice collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted beyond measure, and heard the doctor's voice as though from a great distance. "It is a boy, a healthy baby boy. Congratulations, you two." Isaac was crying openly as Dr. Harrison cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket, then placed him carefully in Beatrice's arms. She looked down at the tiny, red-faced creature, at his shock of dark hair and his furiously waving fists, and felt a love so fierce and overwhelming that it took her breath away. "Hello, William," she whispered, touching his soft cheek with one finger. "Welcome to the world, little one." Isaac knelt beside the bed, his arm around Beatrice, staring at their son with wonder written all over his face. "He is perfect," he breathed. "Beatrice, you did it. You are amazing." "We did it," she corrected, leaning her head against his shoulder. "All three of us." Dr. Harrison finished checking both Beatrice and the baby, pronounced them both healthy, and left with instructions for rest and care, promising to return in a few days to check on them. Once he was gone, Isaac climbed carefully into bed beside Beatrice, and they lay there together, their son cradled between them, watching him sleep. "I cannot believe he is real," Isaac murmured, carefully touching William's tiny hand, marveling when the baby's fingers curled instinctively around his own. "I cannot believe we made him." "He has your nose," Beatrice observed, her voice heavy with exhaustion but filled with contentment, "and I think he is going to have your eyes too. As long as he has your heart and your strength, he will be just fine," Isaac said, kissing her gently. "Thank you, Beatrice. Thank you for this gift, for our son, for being brave enough to go through all of that. I was so scared." "So was I," she admitted, "but it was worth it. He is worth everything." The first weeks with William were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. He was a good baby, healthy and strong, but he needed constant care and attention. Isaac proved to be a natural father, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with William at all hours of the night, and staring at his son with a devotion that made Beatrice's heart swell every time she saw it. They took turns getting up in the night, supporting each other through the difficult moments and celebrating every milestone together. When William was 3 months old, they made the trip into town for supplies, bundling the baby warmly against the cold January air. The townspeople they had come to know over the past year and a half gathered around to coo over the baby and offer their congratulations. Mrs. Jenkins, who ran the general store, held William and declared him the handsomest baby she had ever seen. Reverend Thomas blessed him and commented on what a fine family the Sutherlands made. As they loaded their supplies into the wagon, Isaac paused to look at Beatrice, who was settling William into the nest of blankets they had prepared for him. The afternoon sun caught her hair, turning it to gold, and her face was soft with maternal love as she adjusted the baby's bonnet. Isaac felt his throat tighten with emotion at the sight of them, his wife and his son, his family. "What are you staring at?" Beatrice asked, glancing up and catching his gaze. "Just thinking about how different my life is now compared to 2 years ago," Isaac said honestly. "Thinking about how I almost gave up on happiness entirely, and then you came along and changed everything." Beatrice smiled, that warm, genuine smile that still had the power to make his heart skip. "I was thinking the same thing. When I got off that stagecoach, I was so scared and so certain that I was broken beyond repair. But you showed me that I was not broken at all, just waiting for the right person to see me clearly." Isaac helped her up onto the wagon seat, then climbed up beside her, taking the reins. "I saw you clearly from the very beginning. I saw a strong, brave woman who had been treated cruelly but refused to give up. That is what I fell in love with, Beatrice, your courage and your resilience." "And I fell in love with your kindness," she replied, leaning against his shoulder as they started the journey home. "With the way you treated me like I mattered, even before you knew me. You gave me back my dignity and my hope, Isaac. You gave me a life worth living." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, William sleeping peacefully in his nest of blankets between them. The mountains rose around them, majestic and eternal. The valley spread out in its winter beauty, and Isaac felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day when you met me at the stagecoach?" Beatrice asked suddenly. I said a lot of things that day, Isaac replied, smiling. Which part specifically? You said that everyone deserves some measure of happiness, Beatrice reminded him. I thought you were being naive at the time, that you did not understand how cruel the world could be. But you were right, Isaac. Everyone does deserve happiness, and I am so grateful that I found mine with you. We found it together, Isaac corrected, reaching over to take her hand. And we are going to keep finding it every day for the rest of our lives. As they crested the rise that brought their ranch into view, the house looking warm and welcoming in the afternoon light, Isaac suddenly pulled the wagon to a stop. Beatrice looked at him questioningly, and he turned to face her fully. I want to say something, and I want you to really hear me, he began, his voice serious. When you came here, you told me in your letter that you were barren, that you could not have children. And I told you it did not matter, that I wanted you as a partner and companion, not as a mother for children that might never exist. That was the truth then, and it is still the truth now. Yes, we have William, and he is the greatest blessing I could have imagined. But Beatrice, even if he had never come, even if you had never conceived, nothing would be different between us. I would still love you just as much. I would still thank God every day that you chose to share your life with me. Do you believe that? Beatrice felt tears streaming down her face, tears of joy and relief and overwhelming love. I believe it. I believe you, Isaac. And I want you to know that marrying you was the best decision I ever made. You gave me everything I thought I had lost, everything I had given up hoping for. You gave me a home and a family and a love that I never knew existed. I am so happy, Isaac, happier than I ever dreamed possible. He kissed her then, long and deep, with William snoozing contentedly beside them and the mountains standing witness to their love. When they finally drew apart, both smiling through their tears, Isaac guided the horses forward, and they continued on toward home. The years that followed were good ones, filled with hard work and simple pleasures. William grew into a bright, curious boy with his father's steady temperament and his mother's quick mind. When he was 3 years old, Beatrice found herself pregnant again, much to everyone's delight, and this time the pregnancy and birth were even easier than the first. They welcomed a daughter, Catherine, who had her mother's blonde hair and her father's gray-blue eyes, and Isaac declared that their family was now complete and perfect. The ranch prospered under their careful management. Isaac expanded the herd and built the larger barn he had always wanted, while Beatrice's fruit trees matured and began producing abundant crops that she preserved and sold in town. They hired a hand to help with the work as Isaac's reputation as a fair employer and skilled rancher spread, and they became respected members of the Alamosa community. On Sundays, they would climb the hill behind the house to visit Catherine's grave, bringing the children with them. Isaac would introduce William and little Catherine to the woman they were named after, telling them stories about her kindness and her gentle spirit. Beatrice would stand beside him, her hand in his, grateful that he had loved so deeply before and thankful that his heart had been big enough to love again. Do you think she would have approved of us? Beatrice asked one Sunday afternoon, watching their children play among the wildflowers that grew thick around the crosses. I know she would have, Isaac said with certainty. Catherine wanted me to be happy. She made me promise right before she died that I would not give up on life, that I would find love again if I could. I think she would be glad that I found you, that I found a way to live fully again, instead of just existing. I am glad too, Beatrice said, squeezing his hand, for all of it, even the hard parts that brought us here. I would not change a single thing about our story, Isaac. He pulled her close, kissing the top of her head as they watched their children laugh and chase each other through the grass. Neither would I. This is exactly the life I was meant to have, with exactly the woman I was meant to share it with. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, the family made their way back down the hill toward the house. Smoke was rising from the chimney, and the windows glowed with welcoming light. Isaac scooped little Catherine onto his shoulders while Beatrice took William's hand, and together they walked toward the home they had built, the life they had created together through love and determination and an unwavering belief in each other. That night, after the children were tucked into their beds and the house was quiet, Isaac and Beatrice sat together on the porch, despite the evening chill, wrapped in a thick quilt and watching the stars emerge one by one overhead. The air smelled of pine and wood smoke, and the distant sound of the creek bubbling over stones was the only noise besides the occasional hoot of an owl. "Do you remember the day we got married?" Beatrice asked, her head resting on Isaac's shoulder. "How nervous we both were, how uncertain about what we were getting into." "I remember thinking that you were the bravest woman I had ever met," Isaac replied, his arm tightening around her. "Coming all this way to marry a stranger, trusting that things would work out despite everything you had been through. I was humbled by your courage." "I was desperate," Beatrice corrected gently. "But I was also hopeful, deep down. There was something about your letter, about the way you wrote so honestly about what you wanted and what you could offer. It made me think that maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance for happiness in this world." "And were you right?" Isaac asked, though he already knew the answer. "So very right," Beatrice confirmed, turning her face up to kiss him. "More right than I ever could have imagined. You gave me everything, Isaac. A home, a family, respect, love. You saw value in me when I could not see it in myself. You defended me when others tried to tear me down. You loved me when I felt unlovable. How do I ever repay that?" "You do not need to repay anything," Isaac said firmly. "You gave me just as much, Beatrice. You brought light back into my life when I thought I would spend the rest of my days in shadow. You made me laugh again, made me hope again, made me believe in the future. You gave me children I never thought I would have, a family I never dared to dream of. You are my partner in every sense of the word, and I am grateful for you every single day." They sat in comfortable silence for a long time, holding each other and watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. The mountains rose dark against the night sky, ancient and protective, and the valley spread out below them was quiet and peaceful. "I love our life," Beatrice said eventually, her voice soft with contentment. "I love this house and this land and our children and you. I love waking up next to you every morning and falling asleep in your arms every night. I love the way William has your laugh and the way little Catherine wrinkles her nose just like I do. I love knowing that no matter what challenges come, we will face them together." "We will," Isaac promised. "Whatever comes, we will handle it together, just like we always have. That is what marriage is supposed to be, Beatrice. Not one person carrying the burden while the other watches, but two people working side by side, supporting each other, building something beautiful together. That is what we have, and that is what we will always have." As if on cue, a cry came from inside the house, little Catherine waking from a bad dream. They both smiled, and Beatrice started to rise, but Isaac gently pushed her back down. "I will go," he said, dropping a kiss on her forehead. "You stay here and enjoy the quiet for a few more minutes." Beatrice watched him disappear inside, then turned her gaze back to the stars, her heart full to overflowing. She thought about the woman she had been 2.5 years ago, broken and ashamed, stepping off that stagecoach with nothing but a carpet bag and a desperate hope. She thought about all the ways her life had changed since that day, all the love and joy and purpose she had found. And she thought about Isaac, the man who had looked at her and seen not what she lacked, but what she had to offer. The man who had promised to cherish her and had kept that promise every single day. The man who had shown her that her worth was not tied to her ability to bear children, but to her character and her strength and her capacity to love. Isaac returned with Catherine cuddled against his chest, already half asleep again. He settled back down beside Beatrice, arranging the quilt around all three of them, and they sat there together in the starlight, a family complete and whole. "Thank you," Beatrice whispered, not sure if she was speaking to Isaac or to God or to the universe itself. "Thank you for this life, for this love, for this second chance." "Thank you," Isaac echoed, kissing her temple, "for choosing me, for trusting me, for building this beautiful life with me." The stars continued their slow dance overhead, and the mountains kept their eternal watch, and in that moment, wrapped in love and warmth and the sweet peace of contentment, Beatrice knew that she had finally found her place in the world. Not because she had become a mother, though that was a precious gift, but because she had found a man who loved her for exactly who she was, barren or not, broken or whole, just Beatrice. And that love had healed all the wounds of the past and built a future brighter than anything she could have imagined. The mail-order bride who had been cast out for being barren had become a cherished wife, a devoted mother, and a woman who knew her own worth. And the cowboy who had said he married her, not children, had proven every day that he meant those words with his whole heart. Their story was not one of tragedy overcome or obstacles conquered, but rather one of quiet, steady love that grew deeper with each passing day. It was a story of two broken people finding wholeness in each other, of kindness triumphing over cruelty, of hope blooming even in the hardest soil. And as they sat together under the Colorado stars, surrounded by the life they had built together, they knew that their story was far from over. There would be more years ahead, more challenges and triumphs, more laughter and tears, more memories to be made. William would grow tall and strong, eventually taking over the ranch and starting a family of his own. Catherine would become a teacher in town, using her sharp mind to educate the next generation. Isaac and Beatrice would grow old together, their love deepening with time rather than fading, and they would face whatever came with the same partnership and devotion that had carried them through the early days. But all of that was still to come. For now, in this perfect moment, they simply held each other and their sleeping daughter, grateful beyond words for the journey that had brought them together and the love that would carry them forward into whatever tomorrow might bring. The wind whispered through the pines, carrying with it the promise of another day, another chance to love and be loved, another opportunity to prove that the best families are not always born, but sometimes chosen. And in the quiet peace of that Colorado night, with the man she loved beside her and the life she had built surrounding her, Beatrice closed her eyes and smiled, knowing that she was finally, truly home. Years later, when her grandchildren would ask her about how she met their grandfather, Beatrice would tell them the truth without shame or hesitation. She would tell them about being a mail-order bride, about being cast out for being barren, about arriving in Alamosa with nothing but hope and fear in equal measure. And then she would tell them about Isaac, about the cowboy who had said he married her, not children, and who had meant those words with his entire heart. She would tell them that sometimes the greatest love stories are not about passion and drama, but about steady devotion and unwavering support. That sometimes the best partners are the ones who see your worth even when you cannot see it yourself. That sometimes the family you build is even stronger than the one you were born into. And she would tell them that they were the proof of miracles, the grandchildren of a woman everyone said could never have children, the legacy of a love that refused to be defined by limitations or expectations. She would tell them that their grandfather had loved her when she was barren and loved her just as much after the children came, because his love was never conditional on what she could provide, only on who she was. But all of that was still years away, still unwritten chapters in a story that was far from finished. For now, on this perfect November night in 1886, Isaac and Beatrice Sutherland sat together on their porch, their daughter sleeping peacefully against her father's chest, their son dreaming in his bed inside, and they simply existed in the moment, grateful and content and deeply, completely in love. The mountains stood eternal around them, the stars wheeled overhead, and in the small ranch house in the Colorado Valley, a family slept peacefully, wrapped in love and the certain knowledge that they were exactly where they belonged. The mail-order bride had found her home. The cowboy had found his heart's desire, and together they had built something beautiful and lasting and true. And as Beatrice drifted off to sleep that night, safe in Isaac's arms with their children sleeping nearby, her last thought was one of profound gratitude. Not for the children who had come against all odds, though they were precious beyond measure, but for the man who had loved her first, who had seen her value when she could not see it herself, who had promised to cherish her and had kept that promise every single day. That was the real miracle, she thought, as sleep claimed her. Not the children, wonderful as they were, but the love. The steady, faithful, unwavering love of a good man who had married her, not children, and who had shown her every day what it meant to be truly valued, truly cherished, truly loved. That was the gift that had changed everything, the blessing that had made all the rest possible. And in that love, Beatrice had finally found what she had been searching for all along, not redemption or vindication, but simply a place to belong, a person to belong with, and the knowledge that she was enough, exactly as she was. The Wild West had given her many things, harsh winters and hard work, breathtaking beauty and unexpected community, but most of all, it had given her Isaac, and through him, she had found herself. The story of the mail-order bride and the cowboy who loved her became a quiet legend in Alamosa, passed down through generations as an example of what real love looked like. Not the dramatic passion of dime novels, but the steady devotion of two people who chose each other every day, who supported each other through every challenge, who built a life together one moment at a time. And when Isaac and Beatrice were very old, sitting together on that same porch they had sat on so many times before, watching their grandchildren play in the yard where their own children had once played, they would hold hands and smile at each other with the secret knowledge of a love that had lasted a lifetime. A love that had started with a desperate letter and a kind response, that had grown through trust and respect and genuine affection, and that had endured through all the years and all the changes, as constant as the mountains and as eternal as the stars. That was their story, the mail-order bride and the cowboy, and it was a good one, full of love and hope and second chances. It was a story that proved that sometimes the greatest adventures are not about conquering new territories or striking it rich, but about finding the courage to love again after loss, to trust again after betrayal, to hope again after despair. And it was a story that would be remembered long after they were gone, a testament to the power of kindness and the strength of true love. In the end, that was all that really mattered. Not the ranch or the money or even the children, precious as they all were, but the love between two people who had found each other against all odds and had built something beautiful together. That was the legacy they would leave behind, the greatest treasure they could pass on to their children and grandchildren, the knowledge that real love exists, that it can heal old wounds and build new dreams, and that sometimes, if you are very lucky, you find a person who loves you not for what you can give them, but simply for who you are. And for Beatrice and Isaac Sutherland, that knowledge, that love, that life together was more than enough. It was everything.